Welcome to the American Society of Quality Lean Enterprise Division 2016 webinar series. By listening to our webinar series, you will get the best of the best in the lean industry. Stay tuned to the end of this recording for more details. This month, our speaker is Robert Hafey, President of RBH Consulting. With over 40 years of experience and the last 18 in lean safety, Robert is the leading expert in using safety to engage the workforce in your lean efforts. Robert's book, Lean Safety Gemba Walks for Workforce Engagement, is full of practical experiences using safety to engage the workforce. Now let's join Robert as he presents Lean Safety Gemba Walks for Workforce Engagement.
Thanks, Paul. Well, thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy day to be here. I want you to know that I want to change the world, or at least how the world views workplace safety. In this picture on the first slide are the cliffs of Moher. They're on the western shore of Ireland. And when I first visited there in the early 90s, you parked in a parking lot, walked across the street. You could walk up to the cliffs and walk left or right and view over the cliffs. And when I visited there about 4 summers ago again, things had changed. You're now parked in a paved parking lot. You walked across the road, and there were concrete walkways that led you to the cliffs. And when you got there, you came upon this vertical stone that you see on the slide. Now you could go left or right, and when you did that, you came to a viewing platform. So you could get up on the platform and safely view over the cliffs of Moher. And if you continued left or right, there were huge signs that said, "Do not go beyond this point." But it's funny, if you look at this slide, people do go beyond that point, and they stand along the edges of the cliffs of Moher. And the problem with that is that cliffs erode from the bottom, and so probably for hundreds or thousands of years, people have been falling off the cliffs of Moher. And when you fall off, you don't survive. So the question is, why do people do that? Well, I believe it's because that's the culture at the cliffs of Moher. And the culture there and the culture in your facilities where you work is how people think, act, and interact. And everybody has a unique culture. So here's the first poll question. What's the primary focus of your current safety program? Is it compliance to OSHA regulations? Is it the continuous improvement of safety? Or is it a combination of the two? We'll give you a minute to answer.
And Bob, it takes usually about 20, 30 seconds here. The numbers are coming in, so we'll give everybody just a second here. Get everybody going here. So that just looks like a beautiful place there in Ireland. Is that where you said it was?
It is. Yeah, it is. The western shore of Ireland.
Have you been there often?
I've been to Ireland 4 times and to the cliffs of Moher twice.
Okay, looks like our results are 14% compliance to regulations, 14% in continuous improvement of safety, and 73% a combination of the two.
All right, thank you. All right, I often, when I'm doing a workshop where I can see people, I ask them if they believe their place is a safe place to work. And usually if I stare at them enough, I'll guilt a few of them into raising their hands, and then the others will follow. And in the end, I tell them there's no such thing as a safe place to work, because workplaces are filled with danger. And it's only through constant vigilance and raising safety awareness that we can hope to prevent accidents. And because I am a lean consultant, and I should admit that up front, I am not a safety professional. I have no letters after my name designating me as any kind of a safety professional. I am a lean consultant, but I know safety because I worked in operations for 40 plus years. And so anybody that's on the lean journey or the excellence journey must understand that safety has to be first. And when workers stay healthy and whole, businesses prosper, and they experience lower cost, higher quality, increase productivity, better worker morale, and reduce turnover. You know, people at work, people that do the work with their hands know when management really cares about them. So, current state, if you're a lean thinker, you're always talking current state and future state. And current state safety programs in most businesses are based on compliance, and that is compliance to OSHA. And it should be obvious to all of us that if you comply with OSHA, it's not enough to prevent injuries. And what's missing in compliance programs are continuous improvement activities and broad employee engagement, because compliance is a top-down directive activity. OSHA sets the rules, safety professionals interpret the rules, go to their management teams, and tell them what they need to do to stay compliant. So it's push, it's top-down directed activity. And as lean thinkers, we're always trying to get to pull, where we take customer orders and we deliver one at a time. So to do that, you have to engage your employees in the program. And too often with compliance programs, employees are just working and trying not to get hurt, and safety managers are pushing whatever comes down the pipeline from OSHA. Another thing that's missing is direct leadership involvement. Leaders are very busy people, and they often hire safety professionals, and they essentially tell them, you know, make sure we're in compliance and we're not getting in trouble and keep our employees safe. And then the leaders go off and do the other things leaders have to do. But if you're a lean thinker, you understand you can establish leader safety standard work and can do other things to make sure leadership is involved in your safety program. One thing I always find interesting when I do public workshops and then I do individual workshops with individual clients, and I always ask the attendees, you know, what's the definition of lean that your business is using? And hardly ever, especially if I'm doing it with an individual company. And I did an event just last week, and I'm going back there again next week. I had about 16 people in the workshop, and I asked, what's the definition of lean you're using here in the business that you all understand, that you're sharing with all of your employees? And they didn't know. So you should know. So I always include this slide because there's a lot of misconceptions about what lean is and what lean is not. And the thing, or the point I want to make, is that lean is not a cost savings program. Too many management teams around the world have used lean as a cost savings program. So when the people who do the work hear the word lean, they're pretty much running the other way. And to be successful at lean, you have to engage their hearts and minds, and it's real difficult to do that if they think lean might result in their layoff. So what lean is, it's a manufacturing philosophy. So when I say philosophy, what I mean is it's a way of thinking. It's a mindset. It's not a program. And it's intended to shorten the timeline, again, between the customer order and the shipment by eliminating waste. So lean is really easy to understand, but it's very difficult to implement. And the reason it's difficult is because you have to impact the culture. And that's really hard work. So what's lean safety? Well, lean safety is taking that same philosophical thinking that, you know, a business is nothing but processes, and you can improve any one of them over and over again. So you take that same thinking and you use the common lean tools, and you intentionally create a continuous improvement safety culture. Now, that doesn't mean that your compliance program's going away. Compliance is required, and you're going to have to continue to do that and manage that. But in tandem, you can build a continuous improvement safety culture that will help minimize or eliminate the risk of injury in your plant, and at the same time, it'll engage your workforce and move your lean activities forward. So the question is how do you view safety? I'll bet some of you, or many of you, might be safety experts, and so you often take safety walks. And when you go on a safety walk, you essentially are looking at things and you're looking for non-compliance. So if you saw the truck in the top left, the slide, and you see a person in that early prototype of a bucket lift, which is a ladder and some 2x4s, you would immediately identify that as a safety risk and a problem. Or the middle picture, the job description of the three gentlemen in the red helmets, their job description is counterweight, and they're standing on a plank so their coworker won't fall between the ship and the dock. If you saw that, you would recognize that as a safety problem. But the picture in the top right, that was in a GCAN facility in Birmingham, England, and this gentleman was operating a CNC lathe. About every 10 minutes, he would take a part from the lathe, he would go to a height gauge, and he would gauge the part, which is what you see him doing. And what happens all over the world, in plants, in hospitals, on construction sites, managers walk by people doing things like this, and they don't recognize it as a safety risk. They just see somebody working, and they think that's part of work. So these discrete or unnoticeable safety risks are what I'm going to talk about, and how you can utilize those as engagement points to drive safety improvement and lean improvement at the same time. So one thing you should know is that lean safety makes sense to employees. If you look at the Dilbert cartoon, businesses do hire senior leaders to manage continuous improvement and help all the employees embrace the changes. Or, as Dilbert says, so wouldn't it make sense if you came up with a program that made sense to all of our employees? And even though the pointy-haired boss thinks that's harder, it's actually a lot easier. And I know that because I've been doing it for 6 years. So everybody in the business, when management announces some change program, they're all sitting on the fence and they want to know what's in it for me. Everybody wants that answered. And because lean has such a bad name around the world because management teams have used it as a cost savings program, and then they've laid off or made people redundant as a result of the improvements, they've really given lean a bad name. So what's the methodology you can use to bridge that trust gap and engage employees? Well, I believe the easiest entry point to start that discussion is safety. So here's an example. Lean safety is focused on the people who do the work. So in this picture, and I was at the AME, or the Association for Manufacturing Excellence International Conference 2 years ago in Jacksonville, Florida. And if you've ever been to a conference or in a big hotel, you've seen hotel workers pushing carts full of chairs or food or round tables down the hallways, and they're all at a neutral and pushing really hard to get the load moving on a carpeted surface. And I was facilitating a workshop at this conference, and I was outside the door while the attendees were doing a small group exercise, and I saw this young lady going by with a cart with a handle. And the important part in this slide is her face. If you look at it and you see that smile, she's smiling because she's actually able to stand upright and move the load rather than lean forward pushing on the load. So again, managers all over the world see people working and they don't see these opportunities. So lean safety is for the worker first, because if you're going to be successful at lean or be successful at redirecting your safety culture, you have to engage your employees in the safety program. So how do you go about doing that? Well, it should be obvious that management has to change first if you're asking your employees to change. So you have to become a process-focused leader. I get to visit a lot of plants. I've been in hospitals. I've been in construction sites. And if you still have a culture where you're telling people what to do top-down directed activity, then you're still living in the left column where managers think employees are problems, and you just ask them to do their job and understand their job, and then you measure individuals, and if they're not measuring up, you ask them to change, and if they're not changing, then you threaten them, and you say, I'm going to go out and find a better employee, and then you as a manager lose sleep at night trying to figure out how to motivate your employees. And what you're really doing is you're controlling them, and you're breeding distrust. So when errors occur, you start the witch hunt to find out which one of them made the error, and then you correct the error. And in your business, you're always talking about the bottom line. You're always talking about dollars. We're a business. No, we can't spend money on that. No, that's not in the budget. It's always about the bottom line. And if you're in a business that's on the lean journey, then your actions have to reflect a belief in the right-hand column. And that is that the process is the problem, not the people. And rather than just getting their job done, you want them to help get things done. So they may have to wear different hats and do different things. And rather than just understanding their job, you want them to understand how their job fits into the total process, downstream, upstream, etc. And rather than measuring individuals, you measure processes. And because you're a leader, you help everybody understand that you can always change and you can always improve a process. So rather than trying to figure out how to motivate your people, you're removing barriers and you're developing your people. So rather than distrust, you're building this sense of we're in this together. So when errors occur, you look at the process to determine what allowed the error to occur. You use tools like statistical process control to reduce variation in processes, to try and eliminate them from ever occurring again. And rather than talk about the bottom line, you're always talking about customer. Because remember, the goal of lean is not cost savings. The goal of lean is to reduce cycle time to customer. So here's our next poll question. Describe for me your company's safety culture. Is it one of discipline and fear, or one of employee engagement and continuous improvement? And the reason I ask this is because discipline is a big part of traditional safety programs.
That previous slide was just great. Is that something that you put together, or did you get that from somewhere? Or
Paul, I've been using that for a lot of years. So I, like everybody in the lean community, we steal with reckless abandon. So I may have gotten some of it from somewhere, but I then modified it and kind of made it my own. So I'd like to give someone credit for starting it, but I don't remember who it is.
It's just a great slide. I don't think I've ever seen it put quite like that. Okay, we're just about done here. Looks like 26% safety manager/management, 9% safety committee, 65% all of our employees.
Well, those don't. I had A and B on my slide, and the answers you gave me don't necessarily coordinate with what I asked.
I'm sorry, that's my error. I've got got them in the wrong order here. So
yeah,
let's do that. Okay, if you give me just a second, I am going to launch this one. Okay, so let this one go, and then when we come back to the next one, which I got in the wrong order, I'll be able to get it back. So give me just a second here to get the results on this one. I apologize for that. I'll blame it on my cold or something. So. Okay, 22%, one of discipline and fear, and 78% one of employee engagement.
That's pretty good. That's impressive. You've got a great audience on today. All right, let's move along. Let's talk about incident accident investigations. Did any of you ever, you're sitting in your office and someone walked in and said someone got hurt? Did you say he did what or she did what? And then somebody in the meeting might have to say they violated a safety policy, and the frontline supervisor is thinking, oh no, I'm going to have to discipline him. And that's a problem because discipline kills trust. So, in my workshops, I always ask for if anybody's ever been hurt at work. And some people will raise their hands, and then I always ask them, how did you feel after you got hurt? And they always said they felt embarrassed, and so it's no different for any human being that gets hurt at work. And so how companies manage incident accident investigations is really critical in redirecting your safety culture, and it's just as critical if you're on the lean journey. So the statement at the bottom of this slide, I think we need to send a strong message to him and her, or her, and all of our employees. I may have used that statement early in my management career, and some of you may have used it also. And today I interpret that as, let's use fear and intimidation to drive safety compliance. I get into some heated arguments with safety professionals in workshops I do, because they feel they need to have discipline as a tool to manage safety. And I think that's part of the legacy top-down directive compliance-based safety culture. And it's a parent-child behavior. And where I worked, we worked really hard to develop adult-to-adult conversations all day long. We didn't want any parent-child relationships where we were telling people what to do. So using fear and intimidation, making an example of one person in hopes that that will make everybody else comply, I think is outdated. So, I always ask a question in my workshops, and I say, raise your hand if you've fallen down as an adult. And invariably, most everybody will raise their hand, and they all start to giggle and laugh. And then I ask them, what's the first thing you did after you fell down? And they all agree the first thing they did was look around to see if anybody saw them fall. And so why did you look around? Well, again, because they're embarrassed. So if someone gets hurt at work, they didn't wake up in the morning and tell their spouse, I'm going to go into work and get hurt today. Nobody goes to work to get hurt. So when they do, they're embarrassed, and disciplining them doesn't help anything at all. It doesn't do any good in my mind. So it's not just me that thinks that. If you're not familiar with Edwards Deming, you should Google Deming's 14 management points, and if you are a manager or you hope to be a manager, you should become familiar with those 14 points and start practicing them. And one of them, near the top of his list, is to drive fear out of the workplace. Because, as I say in my quote, without trust, business improvement is a bust. You're not going anywhere. It's impossible to get the hearts and minds of your employees engaged in improvement activities if they fear the results of their activities is a layoff, or they fear their activities of reporting the incident or the accident or the near miss is discipline. So, as I said, I get into some pretty good discussions with people. And so I'm going to tell you, if some of you feel that way, improvement meetings, investigation meetings are continuous improvement meetings. It's an opportunity to engage your employees in safety improvement and focus on the what and why and not the who. So if you feel you have to discipline, you should have your investigation meeting, and then the discipline should never be mentioned in the investigation meeting because that's a continuous improvement meeting. The discipline should occur hours later in the HR office. That's a separate meeting. So what do I mean by engaging employees in safety improvement? For instance, if you have someone, I'll give you an example. Someone was operating a piece of equipment They cut the tip of their finger because they pushed down a tape head, and they should have used lockout tagout, which meant they should have rotated a valve on top of the machine, which have bled the air out of the cylinders. So when the investigation report was completed, the operator and her supervisor said the reason she was hurt was that she didn't follow lockout tagout. But if you're a lean thinker, you know you can't do an investigation in an office. It has to be on the Gemba. That's the shop floor or the hospital aisle or the construction site. You have to go there and investigate it where it occurred and ask why 5 times. So when I asked this operator, why'd you get hurt? Well, I didn't follow lockout tagout. No. Tell me what happened. Why'd you get hurt? Well, the machine's stuck in the up position. I says, well, why did it stick in the up position? She said, well, it could be that the machine needs maintenance, or I'm not sure what the PSI setting is supposed to be. It's supposed to be 70 or 100. I'm not sure. Some people think 70. Some people think 100. And I said, so it sounds like the root cause is it's stuck in the up position. Says, well, yeah, I guess so. I said, okay, could you get the OEM manual and work with maintenance to figure out what the correct PSI setting is? She said, yeah, I can do that. Well, I said, that's great. Would you then get green tape and go to the gauge and put green tape on both sides where the needle is supposed to be? So if it's 100, put green tape on both sides of 100. Says, yeah, I can do that. And I said, would you go to the other 4 or 5 work teams at Flexco, and would you do the same thing? Use green tape to set the gauge right and explain to the teams why you're putting the green tape on. She says, I can do that. That's great. I said, would you also fill out a maintenance request form so maintenance comes out and looks at your machine today and gets it repaired if it needs repair? Says, yeah, I can do that. So I said, great, we're going to meet in a week, and in the week you can tell me what you did to improve safety. So in a week she did that. So what I did is I engaged her in safety improvement. I made her feel good about what she did to improve safety, or I could have given her time off because she didn't follow lockout tagout. And I was determined not to do that because I was trying to build trust. Because what you need to understand is that lean is a trust-building journey. And everything management does either builds or tears down the level of trust. So if you continue to discipline people, you're tearing down trust. You're never going to get lean. You're never going to redirect your safety culture. So as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about lean safety, and I'm pretty passionate about this aspect of lean and using discipline. So the word engagement gets thrown around a lot. Everybody says they're trying to engage their employees. When I ask people, what do you mean by that, I get a lot of different answers. But to me, an engaged employee is someone when they leave at the end of the day, they feel like they've really made a difference at work. And then oftentimes I ask people in workshops, tell me about your best day at work. And the answers I get are always, a day like they really felt like they made a difference. They really had an impact on the business. So it wasn't a day where I just came in and I did the same old, and I went home at the end of the day. They really had a chance to make a difference. So engaged employees feel that way, and the Gallup organization, they have a consulting branch, and they conduct employee engagement surveys with businesses, big businesses that have deep pockets. And Gallup reports that 29% of employees feel engaged at work, 54% feel disengaged, and 17% are actively disengaged. So lean thinkers understand you have to drive that engagement number to become lean, because remember I said lean is a trust-building journey? Well, engaged employees trust management. So all your actions with lean are intended to build trust and drive engagement. And so that's where discipline gets in the way. So in my workshops, I then say, okay, that's how people that at work feel about engagement. 29% engaged, 54% not engaged, 17% actively disengaged. And then I say, tell me about your safety culture. How many of your employees would say they're actively engaged in your safety program? And by that I mean they're on a safety committee, they're doing something actively to make a difference in your safety program. Or are they just out there trying not to get hurt? And most every time they say the number is lower than their engagement number. And the reason for that is because safety is based on OSHA, and it's a push program. It's push. And so lean thinkers understand you need to get to pull. And the best way to understand from a lean perspective to get to pull, if you've ever walked into Subway or Chipotle and you've ordered a sandwich or a burrito, you are pulling that sandwich through their production process. They have no finished good inventory, right? So that's pull. So how can safety professionals, how can lean thinkers use safety as a tool to pull engagement from your employees? Here's our next poll question, and Paul's probably going to come on. I think we already have the answers to these.
And we do have the answers. Before we go there, though, Greg had one comment he wanted to make. He said, "I don't think discipline necessarily kills trust. We have rules of the road, and people get tickets, discipline, but they know the police will also protect them at other points in time." How do you? That's
a common response or question I get, and it's a good one. And so what I tell people is that it depends on your culture. And I've been in all kinds of businesses with cultures where they use discipline a lot. When I go to Australia, they rarely use discipline. So I guess you have to internalize this and think about your business. So if you've been using discipline, what I'd like to see happen is the senior leadership at an all-company meeting talks about this honestly and said, in the past you've been using discipline for safety because we thought it would help all of you understand you need to follow the rules so that you don't get hurt. And our real interest is not getting you hurt when you come to work. But there's a problem with discipline, and that is the impact on trust of everybody. Because safety professionals always talk about people hiding accidents, and when you discipline people, that can cause people to do that. And an example I use is I ask people if they have forklifts in their plant. And everybody generally has forklifts if you work in manufacturing or even in construction. And then I ask, do you ever have forklift incidents? And everybody says yes. And I ask, who reported those incidents? Well, it's generally not the forklift drivers. It's usually somebody else who's finding something dented or knocked over or broken, and it's obvious the forklift did it. And then when you ask, well, why didn't the forklift driver report it? Well, it's obvious they didn't report it because there's fear in the workplace. So if management gets up and just says, we've been using discipline, and moving forward, we're going to try not to use it unless somebody really doesn't follow the rules. They come in, on unfit for duty. There's things that still require discipline, but we're going to try not to use it for safety infractions because we're going to try and redirect our safety culture. So that's the advice I give.
Okay, let's go back to the poll. And again, I apologize for doing that early. 26% safety manager management, 9% safety committee, and 65% all of our employees.
Again, those are good numbers. I'd like to believe them. And I'd love to visit your plants to see if it's true. But thanks for the poll and thanks for the feedback. Again, you guys are above norm, I would say. So my second book is called Lean Safety Gemba Walks, and it's 20 case studies of companies I've been in and led people on a Lean Safety Gemba Walk. And one thing you should know, that this is not a safety walk, because I used to go on safety walks, and safety walks are driven by OSHA requirements. And the reason you do them is that you look at things like, is the area around the electrical cabinet clear? Do the ladders have feet in them? Are people wearing their PPE? So you're looking at things to ensure that you're in compliance, and what you're identifying are the non-compliance items, and then you go about correcting those. And again, that's still required. I'm not saying they're bad. I just want you to understand that a Lean Safety Gemba Walk is completely different. It's completely different. So on a Lean Safety Gemba Walk, we only walk around and we engage people and we observe them work. So I'll walk up to an individual and say, hi, my name's Bob Hafey, what's your name? And I'll let them know why we're there. You know, we're in a Lean Safety workshop and we're learning to make work safer and easier by observing people work so that we understand what it takes to do the work, right, or the work process. So to give you an example, I was in a plant in Iowa and they bought pickup bodies and frames, and then they would build a structure in the back of it and make them into like utility vehicles. And there was a truck up on a hydraulic lift, and one of the workers was underneath it, and he was using black wire ties to tie the wire harness that went from the engine compartment on back to the back of the truck. And as I observed him, his neck was bent to the side because he couldn't stand up straight, and he's trying to look up while standing straight, and he's trying to locate the end of the black wire tie. He had pushed through part of the frame. And I said, you know, I see that your back and neck are out of neutral, you're looking up, it looks like it's pretty uncomfortable for you. And what are you looking for? So I'm trying to find the end of the black wire tie. And I said, would a different color wire tie help you? And he says, well, yeah, you know, if it was white or one of those high-vis colors, like the people in the slide, their vests, high-vis yellow or orange, I could see a lot easier and I'd get this done quicker and I'd be out of here. So when we do Lean Safety Gemba Walks, that's exactly what we do. We talk to people, we engage them, we ask for their ideas for improvement, and we put them on a list. And when I do a workshop and I send small teams out to observe people working after I've taken them on an initial Gemba Walk to help them understand the process, then I break them into small teams. They go out, I give them a target, and last week in the plant I was in, I had 3 teams of 5. They only had like an hour and 20 minutes out there on the shop. And I said, I expect 20 improvements from each of you. And I think they came up with, it was just under 100 improvement opportunities in an hour and 15 minutes. And they did this by doing something they never did before, which is stop and watch people work and try and make it safer and easier for that person by watching what they had to do the work. So that's a Lean Safety Gemba Walk. Another thing I do is Lean Safety Kaizen Blitzes. A traditional Kaizen Blitz is a team-based activity. You give them a target, a work process you want them to improve. You give them some improvement target, like a 50% improvement changeover or throughput, and you use a stopwatch to measure because Lean is cycle time to customer, so it's about time. But in a Safety Kaizen Blitz, we don't use a stopwatch because stopwatches are threatening. And we don't use a stopwatch. You end up with people like Debbie in the middle of this picture who, after day 3 of this Kaizen event, our goal was to make her job safer and easier, and we did. We set up a one-piece flow cell that eliminated her from bending over ever again, and she was more productive and went home less tired to her family every day. Now, how much more productive she was, I don't know, because we didn't use a stopwatch. We only watched her work, and our goal was to reduce the risk of soft tissue injuries, and we did. So when you can do that for someone, then they understand Lean, they understand the Lean terminology, but most importantly, they understand what's in it for me. They understand, you know, what's the benefit of Lean, not just to the business, but to them personally. So the biggest benefit of a Kaizen Blitz event is not the process you improve, it's the minds you change. So here's the real win. Whenever you do that, go out and make work safer and easier, like the picture you just saw of Debbie. When you do that, you reduce the cycle times of the work. You take cycle time out. And that's the goal of lean. So safety for me is the easiest entry point to start a lean journey or to re-begin or to start again with a lean journey. And I say that because every time I do a workshop and I say businesses are they're doing 5S for the third time or the fifth time, I get smiles and laughs from half of the audience, because every business by now, most every hospital, a lot of construction companies have dabbled in lean, and they all start with 5S. But they end up having to do it again because those businesses think lean is a program and they think it's about cost savings, and they're all wrong. Lean is about customer, cycle time to customer. And so they start over and over again. And until they realize that lean is a trust-building journey, we have to engage the hearts and minds of our employees if we're truly going to get lean, and it becomes cultural here. And so to do that, using safety as the vehicle to start the discussion works greatly. And I know that because I've been doing it for 6 years. Now, because I am a consultant, a lean consultant, whenever I visit a business, I'm looking for certain things. And from a lean perspective, they're important, but they're just as important from a safety perspective. That's why lean supports safety. Because when I walk through a plant or I'm given a tour of a plant, I always ask whoever's leading the tour, let's walk the product flow. Where does your raw material come in, and where does the finished goods go out? Or I can do that in a total plant. I can do it in a department. I can do it in a work cell. Where does the raw material come in? Where does the finished goods go out? Why is that important? Well, from a lean perspective, if you have bad flow, then you're not going to reduce cycle time to customer. From a safety perspective, if you have bad flow, you're creating material handling over and over again. And every time you handle material, it doesn't matter if it's with a crane or a forklift or it's someone's back, it's a risk. It's a safety risk. If you look at this photo, I go to Australia usually twice a year to do some lean safety workshops. And if you're at the LAX airport looking out the window, you'll see somebody doing this. Now, his boss might ride by on another tug motor, bouncing up and down as he goes down the flight line, giving this guy a thumbs up because he's doing a good job. And you'll notice he's wearing all of his PPE. He has chocks underneath the tire of his vehicle. And yet, I want to form a safety Kaizen Blitz team, and our goal would be to eliminate the need to ever have to move a load by hand from one pallet to another. So how you handle material in your plant or your business. It could be a hospital where people are lifting patients, a construction site, or it could be in a manufacturing plant. But when I walk to a facility, I'm always observing how you're handling material and why are you handling material. Because the goal of lean is to make things flow, so you eliminate that handling. The third category I look at is material storage containers. How do you get product into your plant? What do your employees have to do to get it out of those containers? Are people bending in and out of hoppers and baskets? Why are they doing that? Why isn't it flow? Why don't you produce the part and package it right off of where you're making it rather than putting it in a container? How are you sending material to your customers? Are you making it easy for them to get it in and out of your containers? So as Yogi Berra said, you can observe a lot just by watching. So stop in your facility and look at the storage containers that come in and out. Look at what your employees have to do to get the material or put the material in, because there are so many safety risks associated with that, but managers walk through their facilities with blinders on, and all they see are people working. Now, if you do a good job of defining a lean layout, you'll address those previous 3 slides because it'll force you to do that. Now, what do I mean by a lean layout? Well, there's an engineering process that I've used and helped clients with called block and relationship diagramming. And what you do is you define the relationships. So if you're doing something to a part, and that part next goes to another work center and it's across the plant, then that has a very strong relationship, and you should link that equipment together. So it doesn't matter if it's pieces of paper, or it's parts you're manufacturing, or it's parts on a construction site, or it's paperwork or people flowing through a hospital system. Lean layouts are critical to getting lean because you have to fulfill those relationships. And if you do that, you'll create good, dense flows, and then you'll get velocity. And remember the goal of lean? Speed to customer. That's velocity. So layouts are critical to getting lean. If you have bad layouts, it's really difficult to get lean. So I ask people in workshops if they have safety posters, safety first posters up in their plant, and I tell them to get rid of them. And I'd rather see them spend their time focusing on the continuous improvement of safety, actually walking around doing lean Safety Gemba Walks, engaging employees in discussions about making work safer and easier, scheduling safety Kaizen Blitz events, and I could go on and on and on, because in my full-day workshop I talk about a lot of other lean tools. I talk about existing safety cultures and how they're managed and how you can change all of that by engaging your employees, because the goal is to make the safety program their program. Where I worked, we had no safety manager, nobody with safety manager in their title. We had a manager, myself, for many years at every safety meeting of our employee-based safety committee. My role was to facilitate the meeting. They managed safety. Our safety manager was, or the head of the safety committee was someone from the shop floor or the office, and so we spent our time making sure we could get as many of our employees engaged in the safety program so they truly understood it was their safety program, and that's the culture we had. So again, spend your time on continuous improvement safety rather than putting up safety posters. There's a lot of talk in the AME organization about people-centric leadership, or if you've ever heard of servant leadership, that's leaders who believe their employees are critically important to the business, and as a matter of fact, they're the most important thing. And so leaders that have been implementing lean because they're trying to drive cost out of their business and laying people off to get those cost gains, they're never going to get lean. And, so where I worked, our leadership got up and said, we're going to start a continuous improvement journey. We want you to know you all have employment security, but you don't have job security. So the difference is that if you come to work every day, you're a good employee, you're going to be employed, but we expect you to change your job every day. Our goal is to have you eliminate your job and move on to something more challenging and better for the business. So making a statement like that at the start of a lean journey allows people to give their hearts and minds to the effort. So this quote here is from Mike Abels, who works for a construction company up in the Milwaukee area. And after I did some work with them, he sent me an email, and it included this. Lean improvement becomes more personal and grounded in ethics when you're really going out and caring about people. So if you go out and use safety as your entry point, people know you care about them. And so it becomes a more ethical approach to lean. And to me, ethics are critical in a business. So here's the other quote I can claim as my own. You can continuously cope, or you can continuously improve. The choice is yours. And then you'll see my contact information. That phone number is the Lean Coaching Hotline. If you ever have a question, feel free to call me or email me. I do have a website, and I write blog posts, and lately I've been putting a lot of my writing on LinkedIn. So, invite me to connect on LinkedIn, and there is a Lean Safety group on LinkedIn that I started about 4 years ago that you can join. And if you have an interest in either one of my books, and I don't sell books, and I never bring them with me when I go do workshops, but if you want a book, you can go to the publisher, CRC Press, and use this code to get a discount and free shipping. or you can just go to Amazon Books and you can order it there. Now I'm going to go back one slide, and I just want you to know that if you're lean thinkers, you understand waste. So at the start, I said my goal is to change the world, or at least how the world views workplace safety. I can only do that through you. So if you thought this was just an interesting twist on lean, and you do nothing with it after today, then your time on this call will have been a waste. And that's the last thing I want. So my expectations are that each and every one of you take something from what you heard today and you do something different with lean or with safety. You commit to going out and do one lean safety Gemba walk, or go tell someone you're going to observe them work and stand there and work and look at what it takes to do the work, and then talk with them about how it might be improved. That's what I'm asking from each of you today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul and see if you have any questions that I can answer.
We do have several questions, and those of you that are still online, feel free, throw something in the question box, and we'll start going down through the questions. Back in the very beginning, Bob, you asked about which companies were compliance-based, and there were some other things. What percentage of companies, in your experience, are basically just strictly compliance-based with respect to safety?
Well, you know, when you say strictly compliance-based, everybody has to be compliance-based. Unless you're in the Ukraine, you know, where I visited, that there's not such a strong governmental organization that's managing safety there. But in the U.S., Canada, Australia, England, where I visit often, people have to be compliant. And so they do that, and they often do that very effectively. But what they don't have are any proactive programs where they're engaging their employees in safety improvement. And what I mean by that is, you know, how are you, in my workshop, I have the attendees develop a safety improvement program which is intended to gather their employees' safety improvements and track them. So it's not a suggestion program, because suggestion programs just put the monkeys on managers' backs. They don't have time to get to all the suggestions the employees give them. The employees stop giving them. So in the workshop, they create a safety improvement program where the employee has to implement the improvement before they turn it in. Now, if you start doing that, and where I worked, we did that, and so every year, if you've got 300 safety improvements documented that your employees are looking for and implementing, that's a different kind of safety metric than I see in most plants, because in most plants, the metrics are all required metrics, tracking injuries, accidents, near misses, OSHA required metrics. Rarely do I see proactive metrics.
How many company leadership groups, in your experience, just can't do it? You know, when you're talking about the lean safety, like you're talking about, I mean, are there some that just can't get there?
You know, when I have the opportunity to take them on a walk, it's an aha moment for them. They can't believe how easy it is and how simple it is, and how by devoting some of their time they can make a difference. The plant I worked in last week, the 15 people I had in the workshop, 2 of them are machine operators, the rest of them are all supervisors or above. And they all were just blown away by, you know, they just stood there and watched their people work, and when I made them do that, they couldn't believe the risks that people were in and what they had to do the work, and the opportunities that were now present to make it safer and easier and engage their people. So, you know, I'd love to have an opportunity, and I talk for free at conferences, and I do webinars like this for free, because I'm trying to help people understand how simple and easy it is. So I'd like to thank all of you. If you share this and take people on one walk, they'll start to see the value.
That's great. You know, when you go around the world, are there some cultures, some that it's just easier for them to do this than others?
Yes, I think, you know, Western cultures in general, where it isn't as top-down directive, especially in larger businesses. I go into small, medium-sized businesses where they're still privately held, and maybe the guy that started the business is still running it. He's still telling people what to do. But if you get in, if you go to cultures where people are accustomed to being told what to do, it's more difficult. So if you think, in the U.S. we have a lot of Hispanics working in manufacturing plants, and they are great hard workers, but they have difficulty taking the leadership when you need them to take the leadership, because they're accustomed to being told what to do, because they came here as immigrants, maybe not knowing the language, and yet they're great people. So I've had chances to work with them in businesses and really turn them around and help them understand what the value is. But it doesn't work unless management also understands that they have to let go and empower those employees. So, it's different in every business, and lean is nothing but a philosophy. So, every business, every person has to take the philosophy, think about their culture, again, how people think, act, and interact in your business, and say, how does it apply here, and what do we have to do to move it forward? So, but yeah, it certainly is easier in Western cultures.
Gregory asked, what's your opinion about programs like DuPont's Stop Observations? Are you familiar with that?
I'm somewhat familiar with it. In the beginning of my second book, I talk about my view of behavior-based safety. And what I want people to know is that lean Safety Gemba Walks are not the same as what BBS promotes. Because in BBS, they're using, words like engagement now. They've modified that because the basis of BBS was always, they thought 95% of accidents were because people, did stupid things, essentially, and got themselves hurt. And so they've modified the terminology they use, and now they go out and do observations. And I know they're doing really great things, but in the end, I have to ask them, what are you observing? What are you observing? And when I ask that question, they're still looking at compliance stuff, mostly. Now, that's different than a lean Safety Gemba Walk, where I just go out and say, hey, do you mind if we watch you work for a little bit? Because we want to see what kind of body positions you have to get into and what you have to do this work and how impactful it is in you. When I did some work for Turner Construction Company, they have an acronym called LIFE, which means living injury-free every day. And I told the people at Turner that's not good enough, because my goal is LPFE, living painkiller-free every day. Because people that work hard for a living take 2 Advil before or after work, or they drink 4 Miller Lights after work, because they get worn out from working. So my approach with lean Safety Gemba Walks is not to observe them to see if they're compliant and give them feedback on whether they're compliant, or coach them if they're non-compliant, which is what BBS does. My goal is to make their life better, and it's a different goal.
Just a couple of quick points here. We're at the end of our normal webinar. We have about 10 more minutes worth of questions, and we're going to continue to answer those. If you need to leave, there will be a recording of this on the Lean Enterprise Division webpage. It'll take me about probably early next week. It should be on, that you can share with others. And if you're interested in the slides, send those to an email to Robert, and he will send you the slides. And with that, we're going to continue on with the last few minutes of questions here. Do you advocate a safety committee for small, like say less than 20-person plants, or something different?
Now, I would still advocate a safety committee, and so just be a smaller committee. But you could take 3 or 4 people and help them, coach them, so that they have a nice meeting agenda, that they're focusing on safety improvement, because oftentimes safety committees will be bitch sessions, and that's the last thing you want. So it takes a manager who can facilitate and guide them in the right path. And I talk a lot about that in my first book, Lean Safety, and I just think it's really critical, because unless they feel it's theirs, they're never going to own it. They always think, they're going to continue to think safety belongs to management, and you really need to change that thinking. So yes, I do advocate it. It would just be a smaller group of people.
How do you hold someone accountable in an adult-to-adult way without sliding into the parent-child mode?
Well, it's by asking questions. The most underutilized skill of, for sure, every man in the world. Coaching today, being a manager today, you have to develop a coaching style, which means you have to ask the right questions rather than have the right answers. So what I do, if you have someone, people always say, well, they're accident prone, they've had a lot of accidents, we have to discipline them. Well, I'd sit them down and start talking to them like, you've been hurt a lot, and what made you decide to work in manufacturing? And would you like to take a mechanical aptitude test? Because oftentimes people take a job because they need a job and they end up someplace where they shouldn't be and they don't have the bottom line skill sets. People work in manufacturing are pretty mechanical, and you get people that work in there that aren't, and then they tend to get hurt. And so you have to get to the real root cause. So an adult conversation might be, are you having problems at home? Are you bringing in something to work that's really burdening you right now? So that's adult conversations.
How do you break down the strong cultural emphasis on compliance in healthcare and create a safe space to talk about problems that are not supposed to exist?
I did a one-day workshop for a hospital system in early December, and it was a Lean Safety Gemba Walk workshop, and so I had their senior leaders. There was probably about 15 to 20 people, about 15 I think in the workshop, and just a one-day event. So we did PowerPoints, I did a couple exercises, and then I took them on Lean Safety Gemba Walk. And it was no different than going into a manufacturing plant or construction site because we observed people working. So we observed someone in like the mailroom making copies and immediately identified all kinds of opportunities. For instance, she would get boxes of paper delivered to her, big boxes that were really heavy. They're on a cart with real low shelves, and she had to drag them off, and she would put them on a chair and roll the chair into the print room. So pretty obvious you could set up Kanban signaling where rather than deliver paper every 4 days, it was delivered every day, and it was always on the top shelf, right? Then we observed someone going in and disinfecting a room after a patient had left. Before a new patient go in, they wanted it to be done in an hour, and the person would take an hour and 15. And the senior leaders are watching this person work, and they're using a rag, and they're using a disinfectant, and they're cleaning the room like it was 1932. And the person was out in neutral and using her hand to wash everything. And so, there's opportunities to form a Kaizen team and say, let's eliminate the risk of soft tissue injuries, and let's take 50% of the cycle time out. So it's no different. A process is a process, and people are people.
And there was actually another comment, or I should say question right after that about the service sector. Is it applicable there? And I think you just addressed that. Can you give me an example of a proactive measurement?
The one I mentioned of safety improvements, where I worked, we asked our employees to identify and then implement safety improvements and then turn it in. And again, we had a sub-team of our safety committee who approved them, not management. So that's proactive. You could set a metric for Safety Gemba Walks for managers. That's a proactive safety measurement, and then you could track how many you do. You could say you're going to do 20 safety Kaizen Blitz events in your facility this year. That's a proactive metric. So those are all things that drive safety improvement rather than wishing and hoping you don't have injuries. I saw somebody recently, I don't know, maybe it was on LinkedIn, but they talked about shame, blame safety cultures. Shame them, blame them. Oh, shame, blame, and train. I remember a lot of accident reports. People always say, we're going to retrain them. So that never gets you anywhere because you're not really looking at the process.
I think this is the last question we have here. Mechanical aptitude tests. I think you said something about that. Are these available readily, or do we develop our own?
No, they should be readily available. First of all, just Google it. But I'm sure if you go to your HR department, I'm sure they're probably part of some HR network that can help you with that.
Well, that's all the questions we have. So, Robert, is there anything you would like to close with here before we leave for the day?
Again, I'd just like to thank everybody for taking time out of their busy schedules and being here today. And again, remember, I expect you to go make a safety difference in your facility. And please connect on LinkedIn. Stay in touch. If you have any questions, call me, email me. I'd love to hear from you. And Paul, I'd like to thank you and ASQ for giving me this opportunity to make a safety difference today.
I am Paul Harbath, the 2016 Chair of the American Society of Quality Lean Enterprise Division webinar series. I want to thank Robert for his presentation and thank you for listening to Lean Safety Gemba Walks for Workforce Engagement. If you have any questions about the content of this webinar, feel free to contact Robert directly. Next month, our presenter will be Chris Hayes. Chris is the CEO of IPS and an experienced lean practitioner. Chris specializes in working with organizations across the globe, providing both coaching and training in the arenas of lean, including Toyota Kata implementation. Her presentation about TWI, training within industry, will be a valuable addition to your lean knowledge. The American Society of Quality Lean Enterprise Division webinar series is the place for you to hear the best of the best in the lean industry and learn more about how to apply lean in your application. The American Society of Quality Lean Enterprise Division is a global network of professionals helping individuals and organizations apply proven and leading-edge lean principles and practices to achieve dramatic results for your personal and organizational success. Come lean with us.